The reputation precedes them, Captain. Elena smiled through her tears. I haven't done anything to you. I just reminded you who you really are. She looked around at the group of aliens who were slowly remembering how to feel. The question is, what do you want to do now? Zorthak looked at his hands, at the implants that had controlled him for so long. The Empire. What will happen to the Empire? That's up to you, Elena said gently. But maybe instead of conquering worlds, you could help them. Share your technology, your knowledge. Learn from them in return. Yeldin looked up from the sleeping child in his arms. The other worlds we conquered, they must be suffering like we were. Then maybe it's time to set them free, Elena suggested. Zorthak nodded slowly. It will not be easy. The core command will resist. There will be others like me too, deeply enhanced to remember. Then we'll help them remember too, Elena said. One song at a time, one flower at a time, one act of kindness at a time. As the stars appeared overhead, Elena realized that humanity had won its greatest victory not through weapons or technology, but through the simple act of caring about someone else's pain. The Valdari Empire would never be the same. And that was exactly the point. Vasquez was tending to her rooftop garden when the sky changed color. She looked up from her tomato plants to see massive shadows blocking out the morning sun. Ships, hundreds of them, each one larger than the biggest city on Earth. They hung in the atmosphere like dark storm clouds, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb light. Elena wiped her hands on her apron and reached for her communicator. As Earth's primary diplomatic liaison, she had been expecting this day for months. The deep space monitoring stations had detected the approaching fleet weeks ago, giving humanity time to prepare. But nothing could have prepared them for this. Sight, Elena here, she said into her device, still staring at the ships above. I'm seeing our visitors have arrived. Commander Marcus Webb's voice crackled through the speaker. Copy that, Elena. We're tracking 847 vessels in total. They're big, but they're not moving aggressively. Looks like they want to talk first. Elena smiled despite the intimidating display above her head. Marcus had been Earth's defense coordinator for 15 years, ever since retiring from active military service. He had spent most of his career as an engineer, building bridges and fixing problems rather than destroying things. It was exactly the kind of mindset Earth needed right now. Any word from them yet? Elena asked, finally heading inside her apartment. She had work to do. That's why I'm calling. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Want to hear it? Elena settled into her home office, a cozy space filled with cooking books, diplomatic manuals, and photos from her travels around Earth. Before becoming a diplomat, she had been a chef, traveling the world to learn about different cultures through their food. It had taught her that the best way to understand people was to share a meal with them. Put them through, she said. The voice that filled her speakers was deep and resonant, with an accent that sounded vaguely familiar. Primitive beings of the third planet from your star, I am Supreme Admiral Kethvar of the Valdari Empire. You will prepare for immediate surrender and integration into our glorious domain. Elena raised an eyebrow. Well, that's direct. The message continued. The Valdari Empire has brought order to 10,000 worlds across this galaxy. We are inevitable. We are unstoppable. Your resistance would be as meaningless as a grain of sand against a tsunami. Prepare your leaders for subjugation proceedings. Elena opened her laptop and started typing. Marcus, are you getting this? Every word, came the reply. They seem pretty confident. Maybe too confident, Elena murmured, opening her diplomatic protocols database. Patch me through to them. Let's see what they're all about. A few minutes later, Elena found herself face to face with something that looked like a cross between a lion and a tree. Supreme Admiral Kethavar stood nearly 8 feet tall, with bark-like skin and a mane of leaves that rustled when he moved. His eyes were a deep amber color, and when he spoke, she could see rows of sharp teeth. I am Elena Vasquez, representing the people of Earth, she said with a warm smile. Welcome to our solar system. We're honored to meet you. Kethvar's amber eyes narrowed. You do not seem appropriately terrified. Elena laughed. Why would I be terrified? This is exciting. First, contact with an interstellar civilization. We've been dreaming about this moment for centuries. The alien admiral looked confused. Behind him, Elena could see other members of his crew, all looking equally puzzled. One of them, smaller than Kethvar but with similar features, leaned forward and whispered something in what Elena assumed was their native language. Human, Kethvar continued, perhaps you do not understand. The Valdari Empire has conquered 10,000 worlds. Entire civilizations have surrendered at the mere mention of our name. We have weapons that can crack planets in half. We have destroyed stars to make examples of those who resist us. Elena nodded thoughtfully. That sounds terrible. Why would you want to do things like that? The question seemed to catch Kethvar off guard. He was quiet for several long seconds. Because it demonstrates our power. It shows others that resistance is futile. But you said most civilizations surrender without fighting, Elena pointed out. So you're destroying worlds to scare people who are already scared enough to give up without a fight? That seems inefficient. Sub-Commander Yilseth, the smaller alien Elena had noticed earlier, stepped closer to the screen. Human, do you not fear death? Do you not value your lives? Elena considered this. Of course we value our lives. But we also value our freedom, our dignity, and our right to make our own choices. Fear is useful sometimes, but it's not a way to live. She leaned back in her chair. Tell me, what do you actually want from us? I mean, besides surrender, what's your end goal here? Kethvar seemed to struggle with the question. We bring order to chaos. We unite the galaxy under one rule. That sounds like a big job, Elena said sympathetically. Must be exhausting. Are you getting any help? Any days off? The two aliens looked at each other. Elena could see confusion in their amber eyes. This conversation was not going the way they had expected. We do not require assistance, Kethvar said finally. We are the Valdari Empire. We are sufficient, unto ourselves. Elena made a note on her laptop. Everyone needs help sometimes. Even us humans have learned that. Actually, speaking of help, are you folks hungry? I was just about to start lunch. I could make enough for everyone. Yilseth tilted his head. You wish to feed us? Well, sure. You've traveled a long way to get here. You must be tired. Food is how humans show hospitality to visitors. Kethvar's mane of leaves rustled aggressively. We are not visitors, we are conquerors. You can be both, Elena said reasonably. I've got fresh vegetables from my garden and I make a mean pasta sauce. Marcus, you still there? Marcus's voice came through the speakers. Still here, Elena. Should I tell the fleet they're invited for dinner? Elena grinned. Why not? We've got plenty of space in Central Park. It'll be like a potluck. The alien stared at her in what Elena was beginning to recognize as their expression of complete bewilderment. Kethvar opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. You cannot simply invite a conquering fleet to dinner, he said finally. Why not? Elena asked. What's the worst that could happen? We all have a nice meal and get to know each other. Sounds pretty good to me. Yilseth spoke up again. But we have come to conquer your world. We have weapons of unimaginable power, Elena. Looked thoughtful. Can I see them? What? Your weapons. I'm curious about your technology. We humans love learning about new things. Kethvar looked like he was getting a headache. You want us to demonstrate our planet-destroying weapons so you can learn about them? If you don't mind. We're always interested in new energy sources. Are they fusion-based? Antimatter? Something else entirely? The Supreme Admiral turned to confer with his crew. Elena could hear them whispering in their own language, and while she couldn't understand the words, the tone was clearly one of confusion and frustration. Marcus's voice came through the comm again. Elena, you're breaking them. I'm just being friendly, Elena replied. Maybe no one's ever been friendly to them before. After several minutes of discussion, Kethvar turned back to the screen. Very well. We will demonstrate our power. Perhaps, then you will understand the futility of resistance. Elena clapped her hands together. Wonderful. Should we meet somewhere? I'd love to see your ships up close. An hour later, Elena found herself aboard the Valdari flagship, a massive vessel that looked like it had been grown rather than built. The walls were organic, with a wood-like texture that pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns. It was beautiful, in an alien way. Kethavar led her to what he called the demonstration chamber, a large space with a transparent wall looking out into space. Several asteroids had been positioned outside for the show. Behold, Kethavar announced, the stellar, lance capable of cracking planets. A beam of brilliant energy lanced out from the ship, striking the largest asteroid. The rock exploded in a shower of debris, completely vaporized in seconds. Elena applauded. That's incredible. The energy density must be enormous. How do you contain that much power? Yilseth blinked. You are impressed with our weapon? Absolutely. The engineering alone must be fascinating. Is it based on focused particle acceleration? Controlled fusion? I'm sorry, I'm not a physicist, but I find this stuff amazing. Kethavar looked confused again. But it is a weapon of mass destruction. Elena nodded. It's also an incredible feat of engineering and physics. You could probably use that same technology for asteroid mining, space construction, all sorts of useful things. She paused, looking out at the debris field. Actually, that gives me an idea. Marcus, are you monitoring this? Loud and clear. Elena, show them the new mining platform, the one we've been testing near Mars. Through the transparent wall, Elena could see a much smaller human ship approaching. It was ugly compared to the elegant Valdari vessels, basically a collection of industrial equipment bolted to a frame with engines attached. That is your warship? Kethavar asked. Elena laughed. That's our mining platform, watch this. The human ship extended several mechanical arms and began systematically dismantling one of the remaining asteroids. Instead of vaporizing it, the platform carefully separated the valuable metals from the rock, sorting and processing the materials as it worked. In about an hour, that asteroid will be refined into useful raw materials, Elena explained. Steel, titanium, rare earth elements all sorted and ready for construction projects. Yilseth watched the process with fascination. Your ship creates rather than destroys. That's kind of our thing, Elena said. We've found that building stuff is usually more useful than blowing it up. Kethavar was quiet for a long time, watching the human mining platform work. This is efficient, Elena smiled. We learned efficiency the hard way. Our planet has limited resources, so we had to get creative about using what we have. But what about your military might? Yilseth asked. How do you defend yourselves? Without weapons of mass destruction? Elena considered this. Well, we do have weapons when we need them. But mostly, we've found that the best defense is not making enemies in the first place. She gestured toward the mining platform. That little ship? It could be converted into a kinetic weapon system in about 6 hours. Just point it at a target and throw rocks really, really fast. But why would we want to do that when we could use it to build habitats and space stations instead? Kethavar's amber eyes were fixed on the human ship. You could turn your construction equipment into weapons. Most construction equipment can be weaponized if you really want to, Elena agreed. But the same tools that could destroy a city can also build one. We prefer building. The Supreme Admiral turned away from the window. I do not understand your species. Elena patted his bark-like arm gently. That's okay. We don't understand ourselves half the time. But that's what makes life interesting, don't you think? As they watched the mining platform complete its work, Elena noticed that more and more Valdari crew members were gathering to observe. They whispered among themselves, pointing at the human ship with what looked like fascination. You know, Elena said thoughtfully, I'm curious about something. You mentioned that you've conquered 10,000 worlds. What do you do with them after you conquer them? Kethavar seemed surprised by the question. We integrate them into the Empire. They provide resources and labor. But what about their cultures? Their art, their music, their stories. Do you preserve those things? The alien admiral looked uncomfortable. Such things are irrelevant to the functioning of the Empire. Elena felt a pang of sadness. That's a shame. Every culture has something unique to offer. We humans have learned so much from each other's differences. She looked around at the gathered Valdari crew. What was your culture like before you became an empire? What kind of art did your people create? The question seemed to hit Cathvar like a physical blow. His leaves rustled aggressively and his amber eyes darkened. That was long ago. Before the Empire. Before we became strong. But surely you remember something, Elena pressed gently. A song, maybe? A story from your childhood? Several of the crew members moved closer. Elena could see something in their expressions that she recognized. It was homesickness. Yilseth spoke quietly. There were the growing songs. When I was young, we sang to help the trees grow taller. Cathvar snapped something in their native language, and Yilseth stepped back quickly. But Elena had seen the look in the younger alien's eyes. There was longing there. Growing songs sound beautiful, Elena said softly. We have songs like that too. Lullabies, work songs, songs we sing when we're planting crops. She looked directly at Cathvar. I bet your people had wonderful traditions. It must be hard to give those up. The Supreme Admiral was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Smaller somehow. The Empire requires unity, he said. Individual cultures create weakness. Division. Elena shook her head. That's where you're wrong. Diversity creates strength. Different perspectives, different solutions to problems. That's how humans have survived for so long. She gestured to the crew around them. Look at your people. They're brilliant engineers, obviously. They've created amazing technology. But they look tired, sad. Cathvar followed her gaze, looking at his crew as if seeing them for the first time. They serve the Empire faithfully. I'm sure they do, Elena said gently. But when's the last time any of them looked happy? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena could see Cathvar struggling with something, some internal conflict that went deeper than military strategy or conquest. Happiness is irrelevant, he said finally, but there was no conviction in his voice. Elena smiled sadly. No, it's not. Happiness is what makes life worth living. Without it, what's the point of all this? She gestured to the massive ship around them, to the fleet beyond. You've conquered 10,000 worlds, but are any of them home? The unexpected victory. The next morning brought an even larger fleet. Elena woke to find her apartment in shadow again, but this time the ships above were different. Sleeker, more aggressive-looking, with weapon ports that glowed ominously in the dawn light. Her communicator buzzed immediately. Elena, we've got a problem, Marcus said. New arrivals. Twice as many ships as yesterday, and they're not here to chat. Elena looked out her window at the new fleet. These ships were painted in darker colors, and they moved with more precision than Cathvar's vessels. Any word from our friends from yesterday? Cathvar's fleet is still here, but they've moved to the edge of the solar system. Looks like they're keeping their distance from the new arrivals. Elena frowned. That was interesting. Have the newcomers tried to communicate? Oh yeah, you're going to love this one. A few minutes later, Elena found herself face to face with what could only be described as the most arrogant being she had ever encountered. Fleet Admiral Zorthak looked similar to Cathvar, but bigger, with metallic implants covering much of his bark-like skin. His amber eyes glowed with an artificial light, and when he spoke, his voice was amplified by some kind of mechanical device. Pitiful creatures of this backward world, Zorthak announced. I am Fleet Admiral Zorthak of the Valdari Core Fleet. You have corrupted one of our commanders with your primitive weakness. This cannot be tolerated. Elena raised an eyebrow. Good morning to you too, I'm Elena. Can I offer you some coffee? Zorthak's glowing eyes narrowed. You will not mock the core fleet with your pathetic attempts at hospitality. Supreme Admiral Kethvar has been contaminated by exposure to your species. He will be purified, and your world will be made an example for the galaxy." Elena leaned back in her chair. "Contaminated? That's a harsh way to put it. We just had a conversation." "Conversation with inferior species is forbidden," Zorthak declared. "It leads to weakness, doubt. These things must be eliminated." Elena made a note on her laptop. "So you don't talk to the people you conquer?" "There is no need. Conquest speaks for itself." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds lonely." The comment seemed to confuse Zorthak. Loneliness is irrelevant. Only the Empire matters. As Elena talked with the fleet admiral, she noticed movement on her secondary screen. Dr. Priya Sharma was calling in. Elena accepted the call, splitting her screen between the angry alien and her colleague. Dr. Sharma was Earth's leading xenobiologist, a brilliant scientist who had spent years preparing for first contact. She looked excited despite the circumstances. "Elena," Priya whispered, "I've been analyzing the communications from both fleets. There's something very interesting about their psychological profiles. Can you tell me later?" Elena asked quietly. "This is important. The first group, Kethvar's people, they're showing signs of severe cultural trauma. And this new group, they're even worse. Their emotional responses are completely suppressed." Elena glanced at Zorthak, who was still ranting about the weakness of lesser species. "Suppressed how?" "Artificially. Those implants aren't just technology, Elena. They're emotion dampeners. This entire empire might be running on psychological suppression." Elena's eyes widened. That explained a lot. "Thanks, Priya. Keep analyzing." She turned her attention back to Zorthak. "Tell me about those implants. They look very advanced." The fleet admiral touched one of the metallic devices embedded in his bark-like skin. "These are enhancement nodes. They eliminate weakness and doubt, allowing perfect dedication to the Empire." "They block emotions?" "Emotions are the source of all weakness. Love leads to favoritism. Compassion leads to inefficiency. Joy leads to distraction. The enhancement nodes eliminate these flaws." Elena felt a wave of sadness wash over her. "That sounds awful. Don't you miss feeling things?" "There is nothing to miss," Zorthak replied, but Elena noticed a slight hesitation in his voice. "What about before you had the implants? Can you remember what that was like?" Zorthak was quiet for several seconds. "That information is irrelevant." Elena's communicator chimed with an incoming call. "Elena, it's Tommy Rodriguez from the Asteroid Belt Mining Station. I've been listening to your conversation with the metal tree guy." Elena grinned. Tommy Fix-It Rodriguez was a legend among the mining crews. He was a small-town mechanic who had somehow become one of the most innovative engineers in the solar system. If there was a problem that needed fixing, Tommy could usually figure out a solution with whatever was lying around. "What's on your mind, Tommy?" "Well, I've been thinking about what that doctor lady said about emotion suppressors. Back home, we used to have a neighbor who got one of those fancy mood regulator implants after his wife died. Helped with the depression, but it also made him empty, you know?" Elena nodded. "I'm following you."
Thing is, the implant eventually stopped working. Not because of any malfunction, but because the human brain finds ways around artificial blocks. Emotions are part of how we process information. You can't just turn them off without consequences. Elena
Looked at Zorthak with new understanding. "Tommy, what kind of consequences?" "Cognitive degradation, decision-making problems. Eventually, complete psychological breakdown. The brain needs emotions to function properly." Elena studied Zorthak more carefully. Now that she was looking for it, she could see signs of strain around his glowing eyes. His movements were slightly mechanical, as if he was fighting against something. "Admiral," Elena said gently, "when was the last time you felt happy?" The question hit Zorthak like a physical blow. His mechanical voice distorted for a moment, and Elena could hear something else underneath it. Something that sounded almost like pain. "Happiness is weakness," he repeated. but his voice was less certain now. Elena's screen chimed again. This time it was Ambassador Kenji Nakamura, Earth's most experienced diplomat. At 87 years old, Kenji had spent his entire life helping resolve conflicts through understanding and patience. "Elena, my dear," Kenji said in his calm, gentle voice, "I've been watching this conversation with great interest. May I offer a suggestion?" "Of course, Kenji. In my experience, the most effective way to help someone who has forgotten how to feel is to show them what they're missing. Not through argument, but through example." Elena smiled. Kenji was right, as usual. "What did you have in mind?" "Invite them to see Earth, not as conquerors, but as guests. Show them what a world looks like when its people are free to feel, to create, to be themselves." Zorthak had been listening to the conversation. "The core fleet does not require tours of primitive worlds." "Of course not," Elena agreed. "But your crews have been in space for a long time, haven't they? When's the last time any of them felt grass under their feet or heard birds sing or watched a sunset?" She could see several of Zorthak's crew members on the edges of the screen, listening intently. "We could start small. Maybe just a few representatives. A cultural exchange." "The core fleet does not engage in cultural exchanges," Zorthak said. But Elena noticed that his crew was moving closer to hear the conversation. One of them, a younger Valdari with fewer implants, spoke up hesitantly. "Admiral, the regulations do allow for intelligence-gathering missions." Zorthak turned to glare at the speaker. "Sub-Commander Yalden, you will not interrupt official communications." But Elena had caught the opening. "Intelligence gathering makes perfect sense. You'd want to understand the enemy before conquering them, right?" Zorthak considered this. "It would be tactically sound." "Excellent. We can arrange for a small delegation to visit Earth. You can observe our weaknesses firsthand." 2 hours. Later, Elena found herself in Central Park with the strangest group of beings she had ever encountered. Zorthak had insisted on leading the intelligence-gathering mission himself, along with Sub-Commander Yaldin and 3 other crew members. The aliens stood in a tight cluster, their implants gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. They looked deeply uncomfortable, constantly scanning for threats that didn't exist. "This is a tactical disadvantage," Zorthak announced. "Too many potential hiding spots. Poor sight lines. Your species shows poor judgment in city planning." Elena smiled. "It's not meant for warfare, it's meant for living." She gestured to the families having picnics nearby, the children playing on the grass, the elderly couples feeding ducks at the pond. "People come here to relax, to spend time together, to enjoy nature." Sub-Commander Yaldin was staring at a group of children who were laughing as they chased a ball. "What is their purpose here?" "They're playing," Elena explained. "Having fun." "Fun." Yaldin repeated the word like he was trying to remember its meaning. Elena watched the young alien's face carefully. There was something in his expression, a flicker of something. Memory, perhaps. "Did you ever play when you were young?" she asked gently. Yaldin's implants flickered. Before the enhancement, there were games, running through the forest groves, singing competitions." Zorthak snapped something in their native language and Yaldin's implants glowed brighter. The young alien's expression went blank again. Elena felt her heart break a little. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" "Proceed." "What happens to Valdari children? Do they get implants too?" Zorthak was quiet for a long moment. "Enhancement begins at the age of maturity. It is necessary for proper integration into the Empire. But before that, what are they like?" Another long silence. "That is irrelevant information." Elena nodded and started walking deeper into the park. The aliens followed, maintaining their defensive formation. As they walked, Elena pointed out different aspects of human life. Street, musicians playing for donations, artists painting landscapes, couples holding hands on park benches. None of this serves the Empire. Zorthak observed. No, Elena agreed. It serves something else, something harder to define, but just as important. They stopped at a small playground where children were climbing on equipment while their parents watched. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, ran up to Elena with a flower she had picked. "Pretty lady, this is for you," the child said, offering the flower with a gap-toothed grin. Elena knelt down to accept the gift. "Thank you, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Lucy. Are those your friends? They look like trees." Elena glanced at the aliens who were staring at the child with expressions of complete bewilderment. "Yes, they're visiting from very far away." Lucy walked up to Yaldin and tugged on his uniform. "Are you sad, Tree Man? You look sad." Yaldin looked down at the child, and for a moment his implants flickered off entirely. Elena saw his face transform, saw something ancient and buried rise to the surface. He knelt down to Lucy's level. I think I am sad, little one," he said quietly. Lucy patted his arm with the same gentle gesture Elena had used on Kethvar. "It's okay to be sad sometimes. Mommy says feelings are important, even the yucky ones." Yaldin's eyes filled with something Elena had never seen in a Valdari before. Tears. Zorthak stepped forward quickly. "Sub-Commander, activate your enhancement nodes immediately." But Yaldin ignored the order. He was looking at Lucy with wonder. "You are very small. How do you know such things?" Lucy giggled. "Grown-ups are silly sometimes. They forget how to feel good things because they're scared of feeling bad things." Elena felt tears in her own eyes. This 6-year-old child had just summarized the entire Valdari problem in one sentence. Yaldin reached out and gently touched Lucy's hand. "What good things? Lots of things. Ice cream and hugs, and when birds sing, and when flowers smell nice, and when people laugh." Lucy paused, thinking. "And when someone gives you a present just because they like you." She picked another flower and handed it to Yaldin. "There, now you have a present too." The alien warrior held the tiny flower like it was made of precious metal. His implants were flickering rapidly now, fighting against something they couldn't suppress. Zorthak's voice was getting louder. "Sub-Commander, this is a direct order. Reactivate your enhancement nodes." But Yaldin was smiling. It was a broken, rusty expression, like a machine learning to work again after years of disuse. "Admiral, I remember now. I remember the growing songs." He began to hum, a low melodic sound that seemed to resonate with the trees around them. The other aliens stared in shock as Yaldin's voice grew stronger, more confident. The song was beautiful, haunting, and alive in a way that the mechanical voices of the enhanced Valdari could never be. Other people in the park stopped to listen, drawn by the pure emotion in the music. "Stop," Zorthak commanded, but his own voice was shaking now. Yaldin's song grew louder, and Elena realized that the other Valdari were humming along, their implants flickering as buried memories surfaced. Even Zorthak was swaying slightly to the rhythm. Lucy clapped her hands in delight. "That's beautiful. Sing more." And they did. One by one, the Valdari began to remember. Not just the songs, but what it felt like to be alive, to feel joy and sorrow and hope and fear and all the messy, complicated emotions that made life worth living. Zorthak fought against it the longest, his advanced implants struggling to maintain control. But even he couldn't resist forever. When he finally let the music in, when he finally remembered what it felt like to be himself instead of just a tool of the Empire, the sound that came from him was part song and part sob. Elena watched the transformation with tears streaming down her face. These beings hadn't been conquerors at all. They had been prisoners, trapped inside their own minds by technology designed to make them perfect soldiers. As the sun set over Central Park, Elena found herself surrounded by aliens who were learning how to be themselves again. They sat on the grass, sharing stories about their home world, their families, their dreams from before the enhancement. Lucy had fallen asleep in Yaldin's arms, clutching her flower. The alien warrior held her with infinite gentleness, as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. "Elena," Zorthak said quietly, his mechanical voice replaced by something warm and organic. What have you done to us, Elena?